And now for the final level, the Dark Palace of Waterfalls. I know you mentioned having some annoyances with hearing the music so much.
Yes.
But I do think it's probably the smoothest jam.
That's a fair point.
I feel like water's just one of those instant wins for atmosphere you can do, like have running water or rain.
Yeah.
Both in terms of audio and visuals, like it's kind of relaxing, even though you're killing 500 fishmen. In one of those areas, there's an enemy called an Armor Knight with a huge flail, and there's a wall with a crack in it. I didn't think to do this when I played the first time, because I'm just like, oh, it's a wall, I get abilities in this game, I'll get something to break it. No, you gotta have him attack it with the flail. There's also a room in this area that's like a carved out stone cave with a bunch of platforms on different levels. Quite a few tricky whip jumps you can do in here, and you have to do some to get to an upper door to reach one secret area. But if you actually run past that platform and jump, you can see an area where you have to do even trickier whip jumps. I didn't notice this until I came back to this room 2 or 3 times later, where I noticed that there was an open space on the map. It turns out that actually doing this will take you to the final elemental boss, the Frost Elemental. This one fights with arm blades where it does really slow attacks, but it also can fire lasers at you that paralyze you. I guess they didn't have a status where you get frozen.
Yeah, next best thing.
Pretty easy boss by comparison. It's just not as aggressive as the other ones. For this, you get the Ice Whip. Once you do finishers with this one, Leon will say freeze.
Very cool.
Now that you have the Ice and Fire Whips, you can go back to the Anti-Soul Mysteries Lab, or that statue. There's a note that says you need to hit it with drastic temperature changes, so you need to use the finisher on one whip and then switch to the other one quickly and hit it again, and it will shatter. And behind that statue is the White Orb. The one that stood out for me is, for the cross, you get Agnea, where Leon holds his fist up and it just fires chain lightning.
Oh, really cool.
It wasn't very efficient, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't care, it's cool.
Yeah, as long as it's cool looking.
The weird side mini-game thing in this area is very weird. It'll look like the side rooms where there's one item on a little pedestal, but then against the wall you see a big open arched doorway with a skull on top. Go in there, you get to do the skeleton ride mini-game.
It sounds completely new to me. What happens in the skeleton ride minigame?
You're on a little platform that travels on a rail. Are you familiar with the Sonic 2 like special stage and the little half pipe?
Yes.
It's like that. There are coins along the path, but also spike trap skulls, and you can collect the coins. It's not very much money, actually, but the idea is that if you can collect all the coins, an item will appear at the end. You get an accessory for one of them and a stat increase for the other. It's really hard, so I didn't do it, and you have to run all the way back up yourself.
Oh no!
Because it deposits you on a lower floor. Very weird. I guess Walter just likes the carnival. There are a few areas that are blocked by waterfalls, and you need to find a lever to deactivate it. Instead of a visual, which they do for when you unlock doors over time, it just tells you that a waterfall has been blocked off, a little text box. Did this cause you confusion? Because it caused me confusion.
It absolutely caused me very much confusion. I was actually just going to mention that. I was like, okay, where is this? What's happening? I believe there was one room I was going in where I could only see it from a certain angle, and I thought that was the room it was referring to. But no, I was mistaken. It was another room. So that was very confusing for me as well. I really needed those visual cues.
The skeleton ride actually deposited me in one of those rooms, so I was kind of there out of order. So when it said you deactivated a waterfall, I'm like, there are waterfalls that deactivate? Okay, I guess that's good. And then I reached a room where there was a place that looked like it was blocked by a waterfall. I could kind of see the path it would take. But I couldn't reach another part of that room and thought, oh no, I deactivated the waterfall too soon. I need to go back and flip the switch again. So I went back up and I did the skeleton ride, and then it turns out that you can't hit the switch again because that's not a thing that happens. You had to get to the other part of that room doing another thing.
Yeah, that's the room I was referring to. So I'm glad to hear that I wasn't the only one that thought, oh, is this the waterfall?
they can render a waterfall stopping, I think. I really don't get why they did this.
That would be so helpful.
Normally I'd say, oh, because they ran out of time, but they said specifically that they finished the game ahead of schedule, so I don't know.
Right?
That means that was their plan the entire time.
I loop it back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with the intro. If you had extra time, could you have considered please doing something more interesting with the intro apart from scrolling text? No, that's okay.
I mean, I guess the 2D games work like that, but yeah, they're on the Game Boy Advance. You can't fit an intro on them. You can barely fit the game on there.
Right?
They put like one song with some choir samples on the title screen of Circle of the Moon. They gave up so much to put that on there.
Wow.
Also, when you get near the end of this area, there's an interesting sub-boss, a shadow clone of Leon called the Doppelganger. How do you like this fight?
I didn't. It was one of those brutal ones. I believe this happened on stream when I first played it many years ago. When I enter this room, sometimes my emulator will crash when I enter these rooms with these kind of intro scenes. So I saw the doppelganger staring at me, and I'm like, okay, he's holding eye contact with me for a very long time. Oh, I don't think this is right anymore.
Oh, like the music kept going, but it just didn't like leave the gun. That's really
exactly. So yeah, don't have fond memories of the doppelganger fight. How about you?
I'm kind of primed to like fighting equals in games like this, but he's really aggressive.
Yeah.
He has a whip, so he has the same range advantage you do, but he, as the computer, knows when he's in the perfect range to start doing it. He can also do quick steps. Sometimes he'll be lined up for a hit, and then he's like, too bad. So, not quite as good as other rival fights. Perhaps one of the harder times to reasonably dodge all the attacks. Sub-weapons can be a little effective on him. Like, it's easier to catch him with sub-weapons. They don't do a ton of damage. I don't remember which one they're weak to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in crazy mode, the hardest difficulty, you fight two doppelgangers at the same time.
Yeah, it is on crazy mode. I watched a video of that fight. You know, I said reasonable to do this, not getting hit. Not on crazy mode.
No.
Then you have to do the weird stuff that you had to do in less good games to avoid getting hit, where you run in circles for a really, really long time waiting for an opening that's guaranteed safe.
Right.
There aren't a lot because they're not designed to give you openings specifically. They just kind of attack whenever. And also they have this attack where they dash at you and leave a fire trail. So when there's one of them, it can be pretty tough because like sometimes you want to avoid the attack, but then you dodge into the fire trail and still get hit. When there's two of them, well, I didn't play this game on crazy mode and I never will, is my answer to that.
Likewise, same here.
He just jumps into the waterway and disappears. Actually, you don't kill him. The actual boss of this area is the character for non-main characters in this game. Leon walks into this room, prison cell, and realizes as he's talking to this prisoner that they're also a vampire. And the exchange here is so dramatic.
It is so over the top.
This feeling. Are you a vampire?
That's right, lowly human.
Why is a vampire locked away here?
Shut up! Damn Walter. I would have won were it not for his ebony stone.
Ebony stone.
Understand that Joaquin is supposed to be hot? They chose him to put on the soundtrack, holding a sword very like affectionately, not in his outfit that he has in this. And actually, very interestingly, he looks very similar to the main character of the next game.
Yes.
They took this character and added more stuff to him, and that's Hector.
Yes.
I'm really surprised they made him look so similar.
I completely agree. I recalled before I played these two games, I saw art of the two of them, and I was like, are these the same character?
He's a pretty interesting boss fight. He has floating swords he attacks you with and also summons swords from the ground. And if you try to hit him, you won't do any damage. You have to destroy these orbs in the corners of his room, and then he's open to being hit.
For me, the orbs in the corners were not obvious at all. Did you notice them right away?
You know, I don't remember what it was like the first time. I felt like I didn't have too much trouble with him. But I think I attacked him and noticed I wasn't doing any damage. And so I immediately tried to do something else, like look around the room.
Very logical. Meanwhile, I'm like throwing things at him. I'm like, come on, come on. Not a strong gamer, as I mentioned before.
Once you do, he's a lot easier to stun, and you can basically just keep wailing on him until his barrier comes back up and you have to break the orbs again. And the fight doesn't change much more from that point. When you defeat him, he bemoans that he could have defeated Walter if he possessed the Crimson Stone. When you go back to Ronaldo, he explains that all alchemists seek to create what's known as the Philosopher's Stone that grants eternal life, but no one's achieved it yet. The Ebony and Crimson Stones were created by accident in pursuit of this. The Ebony Stone causes night to be eternal, so Walter is eternally at full power. Meanwhile, the Crimson Stone can convert the life of a vampire into power, and so Leon thinks, okay, I could use this then. But Ronaldo says that you can't use the Crimson Stone without taking on the curse of the vampire. Even though both stones were thought to be lost, since the Ebony Stone resurfaced, as Leon notices, it's possible that the Crimson Stone might, but Ronaldo hopes it doesn't. And that means it will.
Absolutely. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this character. To me, it seems like there was so much potential there. I wanted to know more about his relationship with Walter and what was the beef with them. But I feel like the game didn't give me enough. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think they assumed you would only want a little information about him to set up the boss fight. I think it's just a weird situation where Castlevania Symphony of the Night had come out and had more story going on, and people liked that.
Yeah.
But they sort of reverted to a mean, which is kind of strange considering the opening throws so much exposition at you.
Oh, yeah.
For all the bosses, 2 of them don't even talk. I think I said earlier that only one of them doesn't, but yeah, the Golem also doesn't have any dialogue or revelations afterward. And Joachim was treated more as a means to an end for talking about the stones for the ending of the game.
Yeah.
Versus talking about the world of vampires, because you don't also get to hear a lot in Castlevania overall about vampires vying for power.
Yeah.
Usually they're all working for Dracula. I think there's Olrock's the one who's like locked away in Symphony of the Night.
I'm really curious about, like, well, if it's a vampire of similar, perhaps not equal power, like, what is the story behind all of that? Like, why is he locked away in such a dark place? How long has he been there? I've really found myself hungry to learn more about this character who was just honestly forgotten about after this one encounter.
We just need a hot guy to put on the soundtrack who sounds like a nerd for some reason.
Yes.
Now that you've defeated him, you acquire the green orb. There are other abilities that are useful with sub-weapons, but with the axe you get High Speed Edge. And High Speed Edge has you dash forward with a slashing attack very fast. You can use it to close distances really quickly or evade attacks that you would not be able to evade if you use the quick step. And I remember when I watched your stream archives and you were having some trouble with one of the boss fights, someone in your chat's like, it looks like they're doing some dash attack thing. I don't know what that is. And I was just like, oh no. If I was there, I could have told you what that is. You had access to it. No.
Yeah, it's sad. I'm learning so much from just having this discussion with you, but there is so much that I could have been doing to optimize my game. There's so many secrets that I knew nothing about. Of course, this is in part due to the fact that I play through games pretty quickly. I'm kind of a linear player. I don't try to look for secrets too in depth, and that's a fault on me. But at the same time, I feel like the game didn't tell me enough to be able to find these things more easily and therefore make my gaming experience much easier. And now this could all be excuses, of course, but I wish you were there in my stream to tell me how to do things. Let's go back like 4 years or something and make that happen.
For me, whenever I got a new one, I'd try to find weapons and then like do the move with them to see what they did. We're actually about to reach a point in the game where you get to a room that has all the sub-weapons in it, so you can just try them out with the orbs right away. It's kind of difficult because a candle containing a sub-weapon could be pretty distant from another one.
Absolutely. And I have another hindrance that was probably not that big of a deal, but I was really trying to conserve hearts because I found it incredibly tedious to hit the flame statues to get more hearts. So I was like, oh, I could try this new move, but I won't.
Yeah. In Castlevania, the statues that contain items are just sort of in your way, the little candles. You can jump and then you whip at a candle, And maybe you could hit that and a candle on the ground on your way down, and the item will fall from the upper candle. You just walk straight forward. Like, you can keep going. And you can kind of do that in this. Like, if you jump at a candle, whip at it, and then when you land, it'll be there and you can just keep running. But it's kind of awkward timing, and all the candles are placed at the sides of the room.
Yeah.
I guess it's nice that they're not in the way, but it also means you have to go out of your way to get hearts again.
The most effective means I found to get it was when I was using the cross move that would have many crosses encircle you. I found that that was the best way to just like farm hearts. But it also used a lot of hearts, so who's really winning here?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. It's like, I need to use my ultimate area hitting attack just to break stuff to get items. It's not combat.
Yeah.
There is an item that lets you break candles automatically when you run into them. You have to be on New Game Plus, though, to use it. And the thing is, the time between the candle breaking and the heart falling out of it is long enough that if you just run straight through the candle, it'll break and you'll be too far away from the heart to pick it up.
Oh, the worst.
So you have to slow down anyway to do it.
Yeah, don't love that about the game, heart farming in particular.
Honestly, that's why I ended up finding out the trick with the Fleamen to do perfect guard against them. Then you get hearts and MP super fast.
Yeah.
I can understand why they don't let you do it all the time. In the Mega Man X4 episode, I mentioned that giving you unlimited basic special weapon attacks doesn't break the game because they have specific use cases. But in this, I mean, if you can just spiral axe everybody all the time, there's no video game anymore.
True, very true.
Now that you have all the orbs, you can open the door, and Leon finally meets Walter Bernhard face to face. And I forget what his voice actor is credited as, but guess what? It's actually Jameson Price again, baby. 3 for 3.
Yes, he is fantastic. It's overdone, but it needs to be overdone. He's got this wonderful way of speaking and adding all of this power to his words. I super love his performance in this, even if it does come across as super overdone.
He's got this fancy red armor. He's got a cape on, but at the end of the cutscene, when he turns away from you, he also has a waist cape under that cape.
The level of extra. I look at that man and I'm like, I want this costume. It would look fantastic.
He's done a lot of awful things to Leon, but on the other hand, stay winning, queen. Keep it up. When Leon meets him, he does a little magic cape trick to reveal Sarah. And it turns out Sarah actually does look kind of dead-eyed. I mean, she's in a trance this time, but this is what she looks like, actually. It wasn't the succubus not doing a good imitation.
Yeah, and I do wonder, we were talking about CRTs before, I wonder if she would look a little better if we saw her through a CRT, but I have a feeling, maybe not.
I don't think so.
I don't think anything could save her.
Leon tries attacking Walter, and this happens.
Well, that whip is Ronaldo's, is it?
It can't be. My attack doesn't work.
I see. It's just as that knight said. Very well. You've made it this far. I'll return her as a reward. I'll be in the throne room on the highest floor. I look forward to you making it there alive.
Leon takes Sarah back to Ronaldo's cabin, and because Sarah has not had a bad enough time already, on the way there, she suddenly gets electrocuted and passes out. Ronaldo reveals that Sarah was harmed by the barrier around Ronaldo's cabin, which he uses to keep out vampires. This is a great revelation, but then it does a very funny dramatic zoom on Leon's face. It turns out that yes, Sarah's been bitten. Leon does not accept this, and he wants to know how he can undo it. The only way to reverse it would be to defeat the vampire that bit her, and as we just saw, Leon cannot harm Walter. Ronaldo at last explains how to complete the whip.
It is as I thought then. It didn't even work for you. Isn't there another way? Well, there is, but... Tell me, I'll do anything! Then let me ask you this. Can you kill that girl? What are you saying? If you make the whip complete, you can destroy him. But in order to do that, you need a tainted soul.
Sarah overhears this conversation and runs off. Leon chases after her, and then she says that she can feel herself changing. Even if he could somehow find a way to defeat Walter, it would not happen before she turns into a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
If my soul can save others, then I won't die in vain. I do not want anyone else to suffer my fate.
Why?
Please, if you still love me, please grant me my final wish.
I cannot.
You dishonor yourself, Leon. How do you think Sarah feels?
I know, Ronaldo. I do know, but... Ronaldo... What must I do?
So, you've decided. You must enter into a blood covenant with Sarah's soul. Focus your spirit on Sarah. All becomes one in infinity. The tainted soul joins his. Undesired and cursed soul. His blood accepts your hatred for the power to slay your kind. Now, use the whip against Sarah.
I swear to you, no more will suffer your fate!
She's had a bad enough day already, and now she has to turn into a whip.
Yeah, poor Sarah.
The regular whip of alchemy in your inventory is replaced with the vampire killer. Ronaldo says he knew about this ceremony because he read about it in the Kronkvist family's Book of Alchemy. I mean, obviously it's interesting for the fact that this is a thing that Matthias possibly also knew about, and also the implication is that this had to have been written down because they knew it worked, which means there's something else like this out there, like the vampire killer.
Yeah.
Which the franchise doesn't follow up on, but I think is an interesting detail.
Yeah, for sure.
The default attack power is 20, and with the vampire killer, it goes up to 40. Maybe a couple enemies resist it, but basically it's just a full attack power upgrade that's just non-conditional. If you have elemental whips, they can still do more damage to the things that are weak to them, but otherwise, if you didn't find any of them, then you still get an upgrade.
I thought it was a really, really interesting plot point. As upset as I am about Legends being redacted for this, I think it's a really neat take on the whole story, and I appreciate that it's something so heartfelt in it, and it's not just, a family heirloom, it's something greater, it's something deeper. It's got the soul of somebody who has been wronged, a soul of somebody who was turned and is agreeing to fight their own kind at that point. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really interesting. I wish I had seen more about Leon and Sarah's relationship.
Yeah.
Preceding this, so I could get behind it even more. But of course, there's only so much that you can cram into a game. It's very tragic, and I thought it was a really, really cool plot point. How'd you find it?
I remember the first time I played it, I'd already heard some people's opinions of it by that point, that it was convoluted. And not that it isn't, but it also then makes sense why there aren't a lot of weapons like this all the time.
For sure.
I think especially now knowing the full details of what the origin was in Legends, it's definitely more interesting than that. There's definitely more you can do with it other than someone was special one day.
True.
Maybe they could have also put more detail in about Sarah instead of talking about how Matthias is literate. I don't know. That didn't come up, and this definitely was important to the plot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You can now enter that last area past where you rescued Sarah, the Pagoda of the Misty Moon. This area contains the most difficult variants of enemies you fought already. There aren't a lot of really new ones here. The standout is when you get to an area right before you reach the second floor, where the Doppelganger makes his return. How did you like Doppelganger 2?
I think I repressed it just as much, if not more, than the first one, or I might be mistaking the two. One of them was incredibly difficult, and I did not have a fun time. How did you like it?
This one I actually liked better than Doppelganger 1.
Nice.
In part because instead of using a whip, he has this sick hand-to-hand moveset. Didn't like that I couldn't do it. Part of me imagines it's like a different take on this game. if they kept the sort of collecting other weapons aspect from previous Castlevanias, it could be like, oh, the square buttons, your weapon attacks are cool hand-to-hand moves. And then triangle's your whip, because it's the slower, more long-reaching weapon. Like, I like the moveset for the whip.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a good way to incorporate it, because there are other Castlevania games where you can get whips, but then you can get other types of weapons. Oftentimes the whip isn't the best one, which is very weird to think about for the series.
Yeah.
I just think, like, if you had a weapon, like, there were still upgrades for it that you can get across the game, but then you could still collect weapons so you get some more variety. That would be a really fun combination. Maybe, like, you can whip grab, you can pull them in and do a sword slash, or maybe there's something you do if you have a spear and a whip.
That would be super cool.
There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
They did something like that in, not the sequel to this game, but the next game. But we'll talk about that later.
Sounds good.
Bad news, it's not.
Spoilers? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So not only does he have hand-to-hand moves, but he also uses holy water and a cross. I guess because he's a clone of you or something, he can do this, because otherwise it's kind of weird that the holiest sub-weapons are the ones he can use on you.
Yeah.
The thing I figured out for this fight that was a real interesting click moment for me, he rushes at you very aggressively, but he can also backflip away, so it can be difficult to hit him. He gets opened up for an attack if you perfect guard, but that's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
He chases after me. If I could set some kind of trap for him that he'd run into, oh, I can. With the Svarog statue, the very first relic you get leaves a fire trail. If you press the quick step input while you're just standing still, Leon will backstep. So I would backstep and he'd run into the fire and it would stun him, and then I could do a combo on him.
Wow.
That was really cool to figure out, and I think it's neat that it's something you can do with something you definitely have.
Yeah. I'm glad you're getting use out of it, for sure.
Because there are a lot of fights where I kind of tried to throw it in there with enemies that are fast. Even in those situations, it isn't very good. Right after you beat him, you can unlock the second floor. This is where Leon's theme, which is called Lament of Innocence, plays. There's an interesting encounter on this floor against an enemy called the Mirage Skeleton. As its name implies, it has a bunch of other skeletons that appear. They can all damage you, but only one of them is the actual one that you can damage. The way you can tell is that the room has a reflective floor, but only the true Mirage Skeleton has a reflection. Explaining it now, it seems pretty obvious, but it can kind of catch you off guard because the other Mirages can attack quite aggressively. And even when you know the trick, they might be standing in such a way that they can obscure which one is the real one. Additionally, there's another shadowy pit room, like the one we mentioned earlier. And one of the items in here is the unlock jewel. You remember that door at the bottom of that menacing staircase? Here's the key.
Ta-da!
So when you use the unlock jewel and go down that stairway, the area name is revealed as the Prison of Eternal Torture.
Delightful.
This isn't a full-fledged area. You just go down another set of stairs with even louder breathing. And when you get to the bottom, you meet the secret boss of this game, the Forgotten One. Did you do this?
No, I didn't. I did, however, see somebody else fighting it, and it looked incredibly cool, and I was super sad that I missed it. This is the boss that took up a lot of the screen, and I felt like that was only used a handful of times in later fights, and I feel like it was really something else to see it kind of like break apart.
Yeah. The first phase of this fight, you're at the bottom level. It's a big creature, but you're at the bottom level. It ends at like the torso, clearly been rotting away. First, you have to hit its lower torso to break it, and then you have to break its guts. It's surprisingly violent for how the rest of the game's been.
Yeah.
Also, as you damage it, there's these big maggots that can cause a whole bunch of status effects. I thought it was just curse at first, but they can do other stuff too. Weirdly, I guess I was standing in a place where if I just kept jumping and doing a full whip combo and landing, they never hit me. But then I saw another video of someone doing the fight, and they got hit almost every time they landed.
Oh.
I should mention, when you do a mid-air whip combo in this game, again, they finished it ahead of schedule, but when you do a mid-air whip combo, Leon is just standing on air.
I noticed that too.
It's functionally fine, but it's just strange that a big name release from a company that's known for technical excellence, like this is just a thing they had in the game and it's fine. You drain the health bar. The platform you're on is actually an elevator. It goes up. Now you're at his upper torso level. Here he'll do fist slams, he'll sweep the platform, and sometimes he'll hold his hand up and blood will drop down on you, which causes poison. This one was pretty hard. I feel like the dodges are not very intuitive. Like, I felt like I timed my jump correctly, but then the bottom of his fist would clip me and I'd still get slammed into the wall. But then other times I felt like I was too in the way, but instead Leon got moved out of the way of the fist when it seemed like it was going to hit him. I'm sure you can get it consistently with low practice, but it doesn't look quite right. It can be kind of challenging to tell when he's holding his hand up whether he's going to drip blood on you or do the fist slams, and they require different reactions. A good thing to use here is actually high speed edge. You can hit his torso with less risk, but it does way less damage than hitting his hand, so they want you to get close to his fist. The elevator goes up one more level to his head, and here he can cause rocks to fall from the ceiling, and this seemed like just an attack, but then the rocks were left behind. I realized that luckily the first time he did his big fire breath attack, oh, you should stand behind the rocks. You can quick step through it, but I actually tried to do that and I got hit and took so much damage. I think that's actually why I died the first time, is I kept trying to be cool and quick step through the fire breath.
So what did we learn? Don't be cool.
Well, the funny thing is, then near the end of that fight where I won, I accidentally was too far away from any cover. Literally, I had to quick step or I would die.
Oh.
And then I successfully did the quick step through it.
I stand corrected. Coolness wins.
When you beat him, you get the Black Orb. This gives you a whole new set of really powerful abilities. The standouts for me, in terms of not actually being effective but being cool, is Rapid Slash with the axe. I said I want to do more of those melee moves that Doppelganger 2 does. With Rapid Slash, you kick super fast over and over again. It's pretty cool to hit stuff with. It's not very strong, but it's just really fun. You can hammer it out over and over again.
Sounds very satisfying. I tend to favor these kinds of quick in succession moves, but are not very strong. They just seem more satisfying to me.
Yeah.
Though I know functionally they're not as good as the heavy hitters, but definitely it satisfies something in me.
I think if you get a higher combo count, you do more damage, but it's pretty rare to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to get combos, at least in my experience. I didn't really nail any combos.
Yeah, the game tracks it on screen and has like a little combo rating. Just, you do pretty deliberate whip hits, and the enemies aren't so strong that you're just hitting them over and over again in quick succession. And it resets really fast. You're not going to complete a whip combo, reset, and then add to that combo count.
Yeah.
In terms of efficacy, and also raising the combo count, with the knives you get Blade Serpent, cloud of knives that moves like a snake and hits enemies a ton of times over and over again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's weird. I remember using this on the final boss fight, but this time when I did it, it turns out he's resistant to sub-weapons, so maybe it wasn't actually helping that I did it.
Oh, fair enough.
There is one last quote-unquote puzzle blogging your way. You find a room with a tablet on it that has a 1, 2, 3, a blank space, and a 5 in Roman numerals on it. And you have a tablet with 6 in Roman numerals on it, and if you put it in the slot, it buzzes when the little magic pulse reaches the 6. So you need to find a different room with a sun and moon symbol on it, and you put the 6 tablet in, and it flips into a 4 tablet. A lot of people saw this and are like, why didn't you just turn the tablet around? It's a stone tablet. They didn't punch it with like an indentation machine or something and it left a 4 on the other side. Like, it was carved. There's nothing on the other side. You can't look at the item and it's like, oh, there's a 4 on the other side. That's weird. And then you put it in the machine, you're like, oh, wow, a 4? Like, okay, I get it. It looks a little odd, but yeah, come on. And you put the 4 in the slot and it goes through, and then you get the dragon crest, which opens the final locked door. There's a little stairway, and then you get to the final boss fight. Well, seemingly the final boss fight against Walter Bernhard. There's a pretty fun exchange before the fight starts.
I have been waiting, Leon.
Walter, I will never forgive you.
I see. It seems you have enjoyed the gift that I gave you.
Yes. Thanks to that, I now have the power to defeat you.
Well, that power is quite something. But I am beloved by the night. You will taste my powers.
I'll kill you and the night!
I absolutely love that quote. It is so iconic.
Yeah. There's some lines in games where I feel like if the standard of writing was more to the modern standard, they wouldn't say it, or people would have to intentionally be chasing it. So, like, I just love this specific level of quality where it produces really great lines like this.
Super cheese factor. Absolutely love it.
Then the fight starts, and he'll start doing his attack patterns on you, but you just need to hit him once with the vampire killer. I guess he didn't believe what Leon said about the whip's power because he is shocked that he actually took damage. I remember watching your stream archive of this. It seems like you had a bit of a time.
I did have a bit of a time, and I've since learned from my mistakes, because the second time I played it, I was much better, I assure you. It was actually one of the easier fights, but certainly the first time I played it, I really struggled. It might have been due to the fact that the emulator was lagging a little bit at that point.
Yeah, it was.
But I'm just using that as an excuse. I'm not good at this.
I saw that clip. It was pretty bad. Would have definitely made the fight harder for me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But no, I learned from my mistakes. I found that getting that distance from him to the other side of the room was really helpful. And once you learn his patterns, as long as you're not ensnared by them, you'll be okay. And it made the fight very long, but I did manage to do it slightly faster than the first time. What about you?
I really liked the second time. Like, I was kind of thrown off because I didn't remember him being quite so aggressive. Seeking energy shots, and then the iconic Dracula fireballs that start out slow and pick up speed.
Yeah.
The energy pillar attack caught me off guard so many times, even when I knew it was coming, because it's so sudden. Sometimes when you're close, you'll do a melee combo that's really fast.
I will say, though, my hand cramped really badly playing this. I don't know if you had the same experience, but it really hurt.
I think I had an okay time. He does have one attack, which did kill me the first time I tried this fight on my most recent replay. He'll teleport by his throne, and then he'll summon a big explosion attack in the middle of the room. If you're close to the middle, when it goes off, you can't get away from it fast enough. You can't block it. You'll take full damage if you try to block it. But you can perfect guard it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's really satisfying. It just cuts the explosion off right there.
Oh, I love that.
When you beat Walter, he says that he'll keep coming back. And Leon's fully prepared to just deal with him again as revenge for Sarah. But then the camera cuts rapidly and you see sort of outer bits of a skeletal arm and face, and then Death appears, laughs very heartily, and kills Walter. Walter says that he's been betrayed, but Death says that he is going to grant Walter's power to his master, whoever wields the Crimson Stone. And then I thought this was the Crimson Stone, like a big red egg thing appears. Out of it appears Matthias.
Dun, dun, dun.
And Matthias explains his motivation.
I made Walter's soul mine with the power of this stone.
I sense a rage from this whip. Matthias, you abandoned humanity?
That's right. By becoming a vampire, I obtained eternal life. That was my goal. It was my revenge against God.
Revenge against God?
We have risked our lives and fought for the sake of God. But God mercilessly stole away the one I loved most. When all I ever wished for was Elizabetha's safety. If limited life is God's decree, then I shall defy it. And within that eternity, I shall curse him forevermore.
Preventing others from suffering the same cursed fate. That was Sarah's dying wish. Granting my beloved's wish That is all I can do to prove my love to Sarah. Eternity without her would be nothing but emptiness.
So wholesome. Leon is a great man.
And of course, Matthias is not as much of a wife guy because this doesn't motivate him at all. Since Dawn's coming and Matthias can't do this fight himself as a vampire, he orders Death to kill Leon. He disappears, and then Death teleports you to an astral plane area for the final boss fight.
I still have nightmares about it. Out of everything in this game, out of everything that I said that I struggled with, nothing compares to this fight. The first time I played this, I think I streamed pretty much exclusively this fight for 4 hours.
Oh god.
Because I just couldn't get it. The emulator was lagging at that point, and then when I restarted my computer, restarted the stream, I was able to kill him very quickly, which was very satisfying.
Yeah.
But not after 4 hours. In my recent playthrough, I believe in the stream as well, I did have to use save states. There was just no getting around it for me. There was no way I could have survived had I not used those. So it was a struggle. Someday I will be strong enough to do this fight without save states. But right now, I'm just not strong enough, and I'm happy to admit that. I'm just not strong enough. What did you think?
I remember this fight being a lot better. Other similar games in this genre on PS2 fall apart. Anyway, the 360 era, PS3 era wasn't much better about this. Since the fight was not terrible for me, like it wasn't terribly designed, I should say, I was just like, what a rush. I think I actually beat him on my first try the first time I played the game.
Oh, that's awesome! Congratulations!
Yeah, so I was just like riding off the excitement of that. On this playthrough, I think I actually did get killed by him once, and I'm like, oh, I have to redo the Walter fight. I mean, that's actually the time when I perfect blocked the big explosion attack, which I wouldn't have gotten to do if I had beaten Death the first time.
I'm so glad to hear that you had a much better experience than you did.
After you beat the game, you can look at his entry in the bestiary. He has 4,444 hit points. Number 4 in Japanese is she, but that's also the word for death. So his health is the word that also means death 4 times.
4 times, 4 hours? I'm starting to see a connection here.
It was like death for you, yeah. He's also almost completely resistant to sub-weapon attacks. I think I did damage with them sometimes, but he does a counterattack specifically if you try to hit him with it. Which actually means that, once again, high-speed edge is the best choice to not attack him with, but to dodge his various attacks.
Right. I'm curious, how did you find the depth perception in this particular fight? This is the one I mentioned earlier where I had a really hard time telling when things were going to collide with me.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of difficult because the camera is pretty low. So it can be tough to tell how close you are to him. Like, I think if they just moved the camera a little higher, you could have gotten a better sense of where exactly you were standing.
Yeah.
He flies around the outside of the arena to do most of his attacks. He can slash at you with the scythe if you're close. Sometimes he'll wind up a little longer and he'll throw his scythe like a boomerang. It takes a little while for it to fly back to him, actually, so it can be easy to think, oh, he's going to throw it and it's just going to maybe reappear in his hands or something like that. So then when he does other attacks and then also the scythe comes flying back and catch you off guard, you can summon a meteor shower. And also sometimes he'll shout minions and then he'll summon a bunch of tiny skulls that fly at you and then explode once they get close.
It repeats in my nightmares.
I also played this game in Japanese the first time because around the time I was playing all those PS2 action adventures, I had a big phase where I played every game in Japanese. It was like, oh, the voice acting is so much better. I don't know Japanese, that's why I think that. Also, I'm like, this English voice acting sounds corny, which is bad. And now I'm like, this English voice acting sounds corny, which is great.
Yes.
He also has an attack where he fires these seeking lasers. You have to dodge them at basically the last second because they move very aggressively. Like, the only nicety about them is once you're past them, they don't turn back around at you. But they turn very aggressively. Without high-speed edge, I'm not really sure how I did it. Like, the quick-step timing is pretty stringent.
To think that I would be...
I have the power to destroy all related to the vampires. Though you have divine powers, you are no exception.
Unfortunately for you, as long as my master survives, I will rise from the dead.
I see. Give him this message. You have become a cursed being, and I will never forgive you. This whip and my kinsmen will destroy you someday. From this day on, the Belmont clan will hunt the night!
The castle starts collapsing, Leon starts running out, then you see Ronaldo in his cabin, and he starts seeing the sunrise for the first time in who knows how long. And this would have been a great shot to end the game on, but then it cuts to Leon walking away from the wreckage of the castle, and his walk looks really stupid.
I thought so too.
It's like a little foppish dweeb walk. Like he has a walking animation in the game, that's fine. Why didn't they do that? He's just a proud little butter boy walking away from the castle.
A proud little butter boy. That is the greatest. Oh my goodness.
Before the credits, you get this bizarre piece of postscript.
And so the story of the Belmont clan's struggle against evil begins. However, Matthias and the Belmonts will not meet again for hundreds of years. Matthias goes into hiding in foreign lands and continues to curse God for eternity. Eventually, he names himself Lord of the Vampires, King of the Night. The years before their next meeting pass slowly and quietly, but with finality. The intermission in this exquisite play from which two souls will never escape.
So when I said a lot earlier that Castlevania Legends could have still been in canon, it could have, because that's the first time a Belmont ever fights Dracula.
Yep.
The New Start didn't want to interfere with other parts of the timeline, but removed literal centuries of possibility for stories happening.
Exactly.
And it's just a weird ending for the character emotionally. Matthias admitted that he got your wife killed so he could steal a vampire's power and live forever because his wife died, and Leon doesn't try to track him down. That guy was your best friend and you're not gonna do anything about it?
It's like, I want more. I have to learn more. You gotta flesh this out.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, since they're descendants, so instead of that, you're like, first of all, I'm gonna need a new wife.
It's true. I thought about that as well. If you're talking about your betrothed and how all the hardship you've gone through together, and then you have to continue the Belmont line somehow. How does Sarah feel about all of this?
I guess that speaks to her character even more, because hey, she keeps working on vampires even after this happens.
She's a real gem.
A little strange.
Yeah, a little bit.
Not entirely for that. I mean, that's fine that she supports him moving on to other people, but one, that they didn't just have a kid beforehand.
Yeah.
Which I think would be more emotionally affecting.
I completely agree with you.
Or that centuries of possible stories just removed entirely. Like, literally, they don't do anything. Or does Leon tell his kids about this? Is it that they don't believe him or something? So when Dracula resurfaces centuries later, it's a big moment for Trevor Belmont to reclaim his lineage or something? Or, like, when do they get excommunicated? Like, I know Leon quit being a knight,
right,
but I don't think they got treated as heretics until later as a plot element. It's a weird, huge gap to leave. And then the sequel, that plot is not related to this at all. It's related to Castlevania 3. So
yeah,
I'm just at a real loss here.
So much potential. Wasted.
There are some things you unlock for clearing the game. There's the Jade Mask accessory. That's the thing I mentioned that lets you smash candles by running into them. If you beat all the bosses, you can reload your save, and in the warp room, there'll be a warp to a boss rush. More games should have features like that. It's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's a name entry screen at the start for your character, which is just what you want your save file to be called. But once you unlock certain things, you can enter these names, and you'll get a different mode. So if you enter the @ symbol and Joaquin, you can play as Joaquin. This is a really interesting extra. Pretty weird. It's a different combat style, and the game's not as fleshed out. No shop or anything. No equipment. You find upgrades for your character's attack power instead. He fights using a completely different playstyle. Did you try this out at all?
I did. Not for very long, mind you. I was surprised the fact that he had lock on and Leon didn't.
This is important for Joaquin because he can attack 2 different ways. There's a mode where his swords are pointing forwards, and if you press attack, he'll shoot them directly at an enemy. And if you press the heavy attack button to switch modes, he has one where the swords are in a wider band out pattern, and when you attack, he'll slash with them so you can hit bigger groups. This is why the lock-on's useful, because it lets you keep attacking an enemy on the move. This can make some fights a lot easier because of his playstyle, but the first thing you might think to do is House of Sacred Remains, because it was the first area. Undead Parasite's really hard with Joaquin. You do barely any damage, and you take a lot. A lot of people say not to do House of Sacred Remains first with him because of how difficult it is to kill Undead Parasite. For some reason, even though I heard that going in, I'm like, I'll do House of Sacred Remains. I died to him twice in a row. I'm like, I'm done.
That's it. I'm good. I've seen enough.
It is really cool that this is a unlockable character who works completely differently. This is another one of those things that you don't see in modern games. Like, this is a pretty modest package overall for a PS2 game, but this guy would have been at least $5 in DLC now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then you'd see how much stuff he can't do, and then you'd be like, I paid $5 for this?
I did find it pretty strange that he would enter into rooms and there would normally be like a sequence or a cutscene or something, but no, he just wanders into rooms. I understand why they didn't script anything, but it did feel a little bit disjointed. Especially,
like you said, there's not any more details about his character.
Yeah.
This could easily just be what he did when he wanted to fight Walter and claim the castle for himself.
Right.
They could have done another opening text crawl with narration. You know what? You don't even need to pay someone to narrate it. Just put some text that explains the setup. Just literally anything.
Exactly. It would satisfy my curiosity so much.
You start outside the castle, but if you just try to go up to Ronaldo's cabin, you get electrocuted.
That would be awesome.
If you do beat this mode, you do get a short cutscene. It's just Joaquin sitting in Walter's throne, laughing to himself. There are a bunch of portraits that are in Walter's room, which is also another interesting detail. Like, I wonder what they are. Looks like there's some people in them that aren't him. But I wish that in Joaquin's ending, beating it would replace all the portraits with portraits of himself.
Oh gosh, that would be so great.
Also, you unlock Crazy mode, which is the hard mode for this game. You have to enter at Crazy. This makes the enemies more difficult. Like, it has the higher difficulty variants of enemies, and there are more of them as well. They seem to take reduced damage. You have a lower limit for how many items you can carry. Normally you can hold 9 potions at a time. In Crazy you can only hold 5. We mentioned the Doppelganger fight in the Dark Palace of Waterfalls has 2 Leon clones. Some of those rooms with laser traps where you had to sort of time your jumps and dodges. Now the laser traps swivel in place as well. In terms of difficulty, I'm glad that it isn't just the numbers are bigger. It actually does some notable changes so that for people who are good at the game, they actually get something different to do.
Yeah.
When you beat this mode, you get a victory screen that declares, "You are the crazy of Castlevania."
Wow, that's my new title. I'm taking that. That's remarkable. Oh, I absolutely love that. You are the crazy of Castlevania. Oh my goodness.
Luckily, this game's obscure enough that there aren't going to be tons of people coming at you being like, "Oh, did you really beat crazy mode in Castlevania Lament of Innocence?"
Like, no. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
And for beating this, you will unlock one more character. You enter at Pumpkin, and you play as Pumpkin. Speaking of little butter boys, the really short character that has Leon's moveset, has the vampire killer by default, makes a funny little squeaky shoe noise when he runs, and instead of other sub-weapons, you get the pumpkin bomb, basically just a little grenade, and it has different variants for all the orbs.
It sounds adorable. I'm going to have to look it up afterwards.
When you beat the game as Pumpkin, then over the credits, it'll show little pictures of Pumpkin interacting with characters from the game.
Oh, wonderful.
There's also a thing you can enter. I think you have to beat the game any difficulty to get this. I was kind of confused because it was like at LL skill, but in this case they want you to read the A, so it's actually all skill, and you start with all the whip combos and abilities.
Oh, I see.
And this is another thing that seems like it would be fun to run with, and not just vertical high and Falcon Claw, which we mentioned, but moves where you can go immediately into a launcher and slam down on the ground, do an attack to pull enemies in. Another one where you do like an upwards twirl that hits enemies a ton of times. The final move you unlock, I didn't get it, even though I explored all the areas a lot. because it just takes a lot of kills and types to unlock. Or the other way to unlock it is to do 100 perfect guards consecutively.
Oh my, what?
Maybe against a flea man I could have done it, but I can just imagine I'd get to like 99 perfect guards and then I'd screw it up and then I would turn the game off and I'd throw it in garbage and light it on fire.
Go out for a walk.
Or that, I could react like a normal person probably.
Oh no, no judgment here. I certainly would not think to go for a walk at first. I'd be like, nope, garbage.
Overall, what do you think of Lament of Innocence?
I really am hungry for more of the plot. I want it to be fleshed out. The gameplay itself, I wasn't super keen on. Again, I'm one of those people who like the more linear Castlevania games. I really thrive with those rather than even Metroidvanias. I'm not actually a big fan of Metroidvanias apart from Symphony of the Night.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's pretty surprising. I find myself hungry for more in Lament of Innocence. I think it's a great origin story. It's got a great scaffolding to make a wonderful case for itself, but I feel like it kind of fell short. If I wanted to see a Castlevania game remade and reimagined, it would be this one.
Yeah.
I want to see it fleshed out. I want to know more about it. On the whole, I was really glad to experience it. The first time I started playing the games in their chronological order, I couldn't get Lament of Innocence to work right away, so I was like, oh no, am I gonna have to skip this game? Eventually I did get it to work for streaming, and I'm really glad I did, because it's not perfect, I'm no good at the game, but music, the aesthetics, the clothing, the environment, and the little bit of plot we get is enough that kept me really interested. And I know that there's a huge fan base behind it, and they try and link all these plot points together, and I think it's a great effort. I just wish it were done officially so we'd have something to cling on to. What about you?
Yeah, so as I said, this game stood out to me, and I think it's still true. A lot of those things I felt. Even if the ending isn't as good as I remember, I have seen those other PS2 games. It's not like a lot of the other ones have shown themselves to be a lot better than my memory held them to be.
Right.
Generally, you can avoid damage. Design-wise, I certainly wasn't perfect dodging every single attack myself. The stuff like the map layout is certainly frustrating. It seems quite dated.
Yeah.
I do still think it's good. Like a lot of games that I've covered on this podcast, I think it was like really great. Maybe you just need the right mindset to go into this. I think with the right mindset, this game can strike you as solid. I don't know that you could really play it now and be blown away by the experience. It's just not that kind of game.
Right.
But I think that's okay. The fact that it does so many different unique things makes it interesting. Removing Sonia from the canon probably could have been avoided. I like Leon well enough, but they could have probably told the story with Sonia.
I completely agree. I really like Leon as a character as well, but I feel like there was such a missed opportunity to have Sonia make an appearance, especially in this medium. You know, give her a better chance than a Game Boy game that didn't do so hot.
Yeah. Additionally, in Curse of Darkness, the villain pulls off some trickery to get the main character's wife murdered before the game even starts. You know, Igarashi, I just think you're kind of playing the same notes here.
I think he got a little biased.
At the start of Harmony of Dissonance, the Game Boy Advance game he directed when he came back to the series, the Belmont in a fancy red and white costume. His friend, who he hasn't seen in a while, but has been friends with for a long time, comes to him while he's in a bad way and says, hey, the woman that's very important to you has been kidnapped by a vampire and has been taken to a castle. And then you get there, but you get some hints that maybe this longtime friend of yours isn't as trustworthy as he can be.
I'm noticing a trend.
I mean, they play out differently, but again, I couldn't not notice it. At least having Sonia and maybe some different characters could have avoided that comparison a little more. Maybe her grandpa gets kidnapped this time. I guess a lot of gamers in 2003 didn't want to be a girl rescuing her grandpa. But also, a lot of people in the 2000s had terrible taste and were wrong about a lot of things.
Well, there you go.
How do you feel about the sort of RPG presentation of this game when it's not that?
RPG elements can be overwhelming if they're not executed correctly. So I feel like it did just enough to dip its toes into it, It wasn't biting off more than it could chew. It wasn't egregious in any way. So I think it did it okay. I would, again, like to see it fleshed out more one way or the other, but I can respect it enough for being half and half. What do you think?
This game, I think, as it is, could probably afford to not show you those numbers. Show you an enemy health meter at least, but that's about it. Or, and this is a kind of weird split between Castlevania games, where the sequel has a lot more variety in terms of the equipment you can use and items.
Yeah.
But you can also level up. So if you find like a better version of a sword you have, it's fine, but not exciting.
Yeah.
Because you're also gaining levels, which increases your power anyway. So this is just a different bump happening a little earlier than you might have expected. But in a game like this, I think it would actually work a lot better, where that's the way that changes, is that you just find equipment and that affects your stats.
Right.
You mentioned the Netflix Castlevania show. Were you aware of Leon being the main character of this game before he was mentioned in the show?
Yes, because I played Symphony of the Night per my friend's request, fell in love with it, and then I started playing Castlevania 3 in preparation for the Netflix series, which I knew was based on Castlevania 3. At that point, I watched the first season and I started playing more of the game, so I must have played Lament of Innocence at that point, because I remember feeling a little bit jaded about the Netflix anime not covering the origin story, and in my brain I was like, I want the Netflix anime to be all-encompassing. Obviously it's wishful thinking, but of course I was still glad to see Trevor, because Castlevania 3 is one of my favorites, if not my favorite Castlevania game. I do believe I knew about Leon at the time, at least after the first season, and then they mentioned him, I believe, in the second season with
Yes.
Portrait, which I thought was a really nice nod, and they have a whole bunch of little things that are kind of nice details like that. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot about the Netflix show I deeply dislike, but there's also a lot that I can appreciate about it. So that said, it was very exciting for both my friend and I, who got me into Castlevania. We were watching it together as like a tradition, if you will, to see Leon, and we were like, oh yes, that's the boy, how exciting. It was really nice to see, so it made me happy to know that the team behind Netflixvania really looked at their source material. Some places more than others, perhaps not the writer, but I know the animators really are gung-ho about that. I appreciated that a lot. Have you seen the show?
I've seen all the seasons.
Cool.
I have some of the same problems you do with it. They swear like I did in middle school.
Right?
I would say the swears a lot and also emphasize when I said them, so you really knew I meant business.
To me, it just seems like a nonsensical way to go about things. I'm like, okay, I get it. You can swear. Proud of you. Okay, let's move on. Oh, you're doing it again? Fantastic.
And then the amount of times where like there's an action scene, they cut away to some civilians getting their intestines ripped out or whatever, and I get it. Like, I'm not like, oh my god, they showed a civilian getting their intestines ripped out? Like, that's happened like 50 times already.
Yeah.
I just expect that's happening in the background, and like, there's a cool fight going on right now.
Yeah.
Can we keep some focus here?
Yeah.
Right, intestines, I get it. Everyone's got them. You just can't get enough. Actually, it was them name-dropping Leon in Season 2 that made me realize I wanted to do an episode on this game.
Nice.
That said, if they make Leon swear that much, like, I can't buy that.
Exactly.
Leon doesn't swear. Have you seen him?
No, he's wholesome. I think the most he says is damn.
And I think he means it specifically in the Christian way. We got one response to this episode. I'd like to thank him for writing in, because I sure did bug people a lot.
Thank you so much.
This one comes from Kyle, and he wrote in, Lament of Innocence was one of those games that I played a lot as a kid, even though I was bad at it and could never get very far, so the opening area and House of Sacred Remains are burned into my memory pretty well. I remember a couple of things pretty vividly, using the item duplication secret. I must have learned about this on Game FAQs or something, but if you stood in a specific spot in one of the hallways in the beginning of the game, you could tell where to stand by the light cast by the windows. You could hover over the items in your inventory to duplicate them for free. This was magical to me as a child.
What? That's amazing.
I got stuck for a long time on the whip swinging tutorial. I still don't know why they made it so finicky. Finding the sequence breakaway to the high door in House of Sacred Remains, really carefully turning 90 degrees in the air and whip jumping instead of waiting to get the sprint. Pretty sure I spent an hour or more smashing my face in that ledge railing. I don't know if this is quite the same one that I talked about. That was really cool to get, because you can tell that they made it just barely possible, but they did mean for you to be able to do it. Also says, one time I decided to stay up all night in college and see if I could beat the whole game before the morning. I don't know why. I didn't succeed, but I did beat like 80% of it.
It's pretty good.
I definitely haven't played as much Lament as I have Curse of Darkness, but I have a lot of fondness for it. I remember it not being well liked at the time, but I really think the PS2 Castlevanias were interesting and mostly successful attempts at bringing the Castlevania experience to 3D. Thank you, Kai. We definitely talked about a lot of these points, and yeah, that's true. I think that there's certain things people wanted a 3D Castlevania to be that I don't know are entirely reasonable.
Yeah.
A lot tried it, and most have settled with making the game 2D to do that.
Yeah. I've mentioned a few times now that I prefer linear Castlevania games. I prefer the classic Castlevania games. But I fully agree that it's pretty difficult to take that concept and put it into 3D. So when you consider it in that scope, it's a pretty solid game.
So much changed after this game came out. Before this came out, there was Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness in 1999, which definitely have more variety overall. More playable characters, you're running around these big open environments, jumping around, it's not just square rooms. But by that same nature, they're a lot more frustrating to play.
Yeah.
And in terms of graphics, like I said, it's kind of difficult to tell what's what. That's another thing I think could benefit from a more modern remake.
Absolutely.
In 2004, March, the year after this game came out, there was the Ninja Gaiden reboot on the Xbox, which is like a supercharged version of this formula. It has some action-adventure elements and platforming. The platforming is way more annoying, and I don't like it at all in Ninja Gaiden. But it's definitely a lot flashier. It's also a game that kind of just became its own evolutionary path that just its series followed, and other action games aren't like it. So a lot of people who are Ninja Gaiden fans are just still playing Ninja Gaiden. It's also one of those games where they don't expect you to dodge everything. They give you evasive maneuvers and guards and stuff like that, but when I watched people who were good at the game play it, they'd say, if you get to the end of the game and you can't afford healing items, you basically ruined your run.
Oh.
Very difficult, not very good encounter design at times. Sometimes really cool, and sometimes they design encounters seemingly based around all the game's weaknesses, and I don't understand why. But Team Ninja's had some success recently. Might be going back to make another Ninja Gaiden in the future. Who knows? I'd be interested to see it because of the games they made that aren't Ninja Gaiden, which I like much better.
Right.
The sort of sequel to Lament of Innocence, also directed by Igarashi, was in January 2005. Nanobreaker. This has some more variety to it as well. It has a sort of similar feel in terms of controls and combat, but you don't get new weapons per se, but you get these combo chip things that you can put into the skill tree. So now instead the different combos transform your sword into different weapons.
Oh.
It's actually pretty cool. Like you can do a sort of whip grab attack, and certain finishers like a big sweeping attack will make it like a whip, or like a big slam attack will turn into a hammer. Also, the game has a lot of blood in it. Like the upgrade currency is tracked as gallons of blood.
Wow.
But there's options in the menu to change what color the blood is. And there are, I think, 3 different options for making the blood rainbow colors.
Oh, fun.
Unfortunately, the end of the game's difficulty totally collapses. I said all PS2 games have this problem, and I think Nanobreaker has the most massive collapse in enjoyment at the end. It's probably one of the worst experiences I've had finishing a video game.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's just like an awful rival character you fight the whole time. Also, the characters' names are like Jake and Keith, which is like, wow, cool. I can't believe my nemesis Keith betrayed us. But then after that fight, I'm like, all right, I got through that. The 2 bosses you fight after that point are also terrible.
Oh.
Like, not difficult just in the way that fighting Walter and Death in a row is, but actively bad, unenjoyable, too punishing. There are parts in games that are hard that I didn't like. I've told some people this before, but I think like playing the Dark Souls 3 DLC lowered my opinion of that game versus playing the base game.
Right.
But there are parts of Dark Souls 3 I like and I think are interesting and worthwhile, even if you sometimes have to slog through a part that I really don't like. But in Nanobreaker, when the game gets bad, it gets worse after that. So kind of surprising that it came from the same person as this.
Right.
This is probably the most some people have ever heard of Nanobreaker, and some people are going to be like, it can't be that bad. Okay, have fun, I guess, if you decide to play Nanobreaker. The significantly less cool Konami game about a cyborg fighting people with a cool sword who has a checkered past. Feel bad for anyone who saved up all their game buying money to buy Nanobreaker in January of 2005, because in February of 2005, Devil May Cry 3 came out.
Such a great game.
Great game. My first real character action game. I played it before the other Devil May Crys or anything.
Same here.
I consider Devil May Cry 1 more of like a PS2 action-adventure title with an interesting combat system, but Devil May Cry 3 is definitively all the things that people like about character action. You have a wide variety of moves, and the motivation to use them is like a style ranking system, and you don't have to use all the moves available to you. I think that's kind of more what Devil May Cry 1's deal is, where the moves have specific purposes. Same thing with Lament of Innocence. Devil May Cry 3, it's about style specifically, and you can just choose how you want to approach it. That became an evolutionary line of games eventually, but for a while it was just Devil May Cry. Yeah, January with Nanobreaker, February with Devil May Cry 3, and then in March 2005, God of War came out. Not a game I like especially, but you can't deny the impact it had because basically every action-adventure game in the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation was God of War again.
It's true.
A lot more spectacle, a lot more different kinds of gameplay variety. I remember actually the magazine preview for the game. It was so early that they hadn't even named the main character yet, so they were still just calling him the Spartan. I think it was PlayStation Magazine said he had so many combos it would make a Belmont blush because their only point of comparison was Lament of Innocence, I guess.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that.
Not to throw too much shade. Actually, I'm not going to pretend I'm not. But you actually have a use for all the combos you get in Lament of Innocence. And in God of War, there are like 3 that are actually worth doing. Look, I watched people play that game and they just did those 3 combos over and over again and they beat the whole game. That's fine, but it's kind of non-variety. It doesn't rank you on style, so the moves that aren't the 3 best ones, so you just shouldn't do them. And then at the end of 2005, in November, came Castlevania Curse of Darkness. A lot more variety of weapons, different room layouts and map layouts, and the graphics are better, and the music is better. Like, really so great in all these ways, except that you move really slow, and the rooms are really big. They made both of those mistakes, and it makes me never want to play that game ever again in my entire life.
You know what? That's completely valid.
It's good to play once, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my friends was playing a bunch of Castlevania games and started Curse of Darkness, saw how quickly Hector doesn't move, and stopped playing the game. There's a video I saw of someone trying to get 100% map completion. So the first thing you do is you turn around from the castle entrance, and there's a path that was leading up to the castle. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Except it's a huge roundabout. It's a really long circular linear path. There's one item in the middle of the path, and that's it. And the music looped 3 or 4 times the entire track. And it's not especially short.
Agony. I cannot think of anything worse.
You could play it on an emulator now, and like emulators have speed up functions. That could alleviate that problem a bit. I mean, you'll have to hear the music get sped up a lot, but that's a price I think is worth paying.
Yes.
I looked into seeing if anyone had tried to fix the running speed issue. After I started researching this episode, a couple weeks before, because this game has been out for ages, someone figured out a rough solution. It's not perfect, but they did make Hector run a lot faster. But then seeing that, I realized there's no reason to ever use the dodge moves in this game because you run so fast you can just move out of the way of everything. So it completely breaks the combat to do that.
Love that. I love it.
Playing with emulator speed up to just run through those linear hallways is the most ideal way you're ever going to experience the game, I think. Did you play Curse of Darkness? You did, right?
I did. I remember thinking it was quite weird. For some reason, Trevor just really rubbed me the wrong way in that game.
Yeah, he's a huge jerk in that game.
Yeah. I was like, no, I had this idea of you when I played the other game. Why is it ruined?
Also, he has a whip moveset.
Ah, yes.
I didn't want to play that game again, but it's pretty fun. You know, that machine gun kick you can get with the black crystal in this game is one of his moves. The combat's really fun.
Anyone who ever asks me, I always liken Curse of Darkness to goth Pokemon.
That's true, yeah.
I think it's pretty fair way to describe it.
Also, the secret bosses, Legion, who's in a few other games, the thing they do with them in that game is a little more interesting, and that there's a 2-phase fight, actually. And also the best way to deal damage to him during the first phase is to make the sort of joke electric guitar weapon, and then just have Hector rock out. It'll destroy all the enemies before they get close to you and damage most of Legion's outer shell.
What? That's incredible. I love that. I love that, and I love the chairs thing. I don't know what it was about the chairs.
Yeah, there's a little chair collecting minigame. There's a room with a bunch of chairs in it. Starts out with just like one, I think, but as you sit in chairs, those chairs will appear in the chair room. I remember when I got the final hit on Dracula, I was excited, but then I'm like, oh my god, I didn't sit in Dracula's throne! I missed the chair! Which is the thing you have to do during the boss fight, by the way. You have to run over there. After you beat that first phase, then the entire throne room flies away, or the astral plane final boss fight in that game.
Wow, I didn't even know you could sit in his throne.
There wasn't a 3D Castlevania for a long time after that. DS generation was a trilogy of Castlevania games, and there was like a multiplayer 2D one for the consoles as well. They brought it back with another developer, Castlevania Lords of Shadow, October of 2010. When I said that God of War became all games in the 360 PS3 generation, that includes Castlevania Lords of Shadow.
Yes.
It tries to pull from other games as well. It has some big monster fights that are like dumbed down versions of Shadow of the Colossus, quick time button pressing events like popular games of the time. They got celebrity voice actors. I think it's a pretty good litmus test of how much you like someone's voice. I'd say, like, I like Robert Carlyle's voice a lot. I could listen to him read the phone book. But then his dialogue in Lords of Shadow is about as interesting as the phone book, and I got bored of it, actually.
I have very minimal experience with Lords of Shadow as of this recording. I will be playing them at some point, someday, when I muster the courage. But my impression is not that great.
Also, Patrick Stewart's in it. They gave most of the good, well, better lines to him, and he's the narrator.
That's cool.
As of this recording, Metroid Dread has newly been released, and it's by the same developer, Mercury Steam. And so two different people I saw today were like, I actually have a soft spot for Lords of Shadow. I guess I could see that. And definitely at the time, we mentioned 2D games having a rough go of it in the PS1 era. In the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, when Lords of Shadow came out, everyone's like, wow, a single player only game that's long. I can't believe it. That really earned a lot of points with people.
I do believe that it was the highest grossing Castlevania game of all time.
Yeah. I'm not going to recommend against it as hard as Nanobreaker, a game which takes less time, but takes more of your life away, potentially, I think. If you want to play Lament of Innocence today, it was released as a PS2 classic for PS3 for $10. If you have a working PS2, disc-only copy of this game as of this recording goes for around $15. A complete copy goes for around $30. I don't know if it's especially worth it, though the box art, weirdly in America, is the best. An Ayami Kojima piece of Leon that looks really nice. It mostly emulates accurately on PC SX2. The version I saw was version 1.4, though I think that's the version you used, so maybe not.
Well, my computer was quite crap at the time, so it should be okay if you have a decent computer.
PS2 emulation has had quite a few struggles, though you can also get in development versions. I just think the team's cautious around making a stable release for those versions, but they mostly work fine. You can speed up the game for the walking through hallways if you want.
Sounds a lot better to me.
That wraps up the episode. Ella, I want to thank you again for joining me on this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Got anything you want to plug?
You can find me at Melodubs. I stream Castlevania pretty much exclusively. I haven't done it for a while, but I'm hoping to pick up speed again on my streams. So if you want to see me fail through video games, please check it out on Twitch. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty quiet, but send me a DM if you have any questions.
Their Castlevania cosplays are astonishing. They are so good.
Oh, you are so kind. Thank you so much.
You know, I think I'm just saying things that are true. Is that praise? I think it's just true. They are really good.
I really appreciate it so much. Thank you.
You do sometimes do streams in cosplay, correct?
It's been a hot minute, but I fully intend to do one again in the future.
As for me, you can find me, as always, at BeamSplashX on Twitter. You can find the show at ThoughtABTGames or WeThoughtAboutGames.com, which has the show notes, which will include all the things we've referenced. things that might be adjacent to what we talked about. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to everyone who listened, and keep thinking. Good night.